Hello. In this series of videos, we're going to cover the steps between taking an image file and coming out with a high relief embossment using BobArt and BobCAD. The image that we're going to use in this case is one of a Colt Model 1860 Army Revolver. It's a black powder percussion revolver. Using the basic drawing tools in BobCAD, we're going to draw out all the various parts. We're going to draw some geometry to reflect the topology of the part. There are some complex curves to be modeled here. Quite a few of them that you can see. Once we've done that, and we have a decent set of bones to work with, we're going to use BobArt, and only using the basic BobArt, by the way. I'm not going to use Pro to actually do any of this, although along the way I'm going to point out some of the features of Pro. And we're not going to use every tool within BobArt to do this, by the way. I'd say maybe a third at the most of the tools that are available in BobArt are really even needed for this part. But when we're done, we're going to have something very similar to this. This is the test piece, the one that I did originally, and that I'll be drawing on my experience making this one to do the one that's in this tutorial. As you can see, it's fairly detailed. I'm down to the percussion caps, the pins, the percussion cap chute there, the pins holding the barrel assembly to the frame, the charging lever. Pretty much everything a growing boy needs to go out and, I don't know, shoot at cans, I guess. Anyway, from here we will go on into the first part of it, which is going to be taking the image and delineating the parts and topology using the basic drafting tools with BobCAD. We'll pick it up there. Alright, I've gotten started on the geometry for this piece. One of the first things I want to do is just discuss the tools that I'm using for this. They're the basic drawing tools, but this is the set that I find most useful for doing this sort of thing. I've got them set up in their own little toolbar over here. I usually use them for cleaning up vectorized geometry. First of all, line sketch, simply drawing a line somewhere. Nothing really to that. Quick trim for getting rid of geometry when I've got a little, if I cross two lines then join them, I've got the tail left over. Well, I'll use quick trim to get rid of that. It's very handy. Break divide is wonderful. Turn this off for those times when you join this point and only then realize, oh man, I've got to put an intersection down there because I've got to join this line to it. Well, you hit break divide, you pick this large line, you break it into two pieces. That gives you a vertex, which you then can take grab corner or drag corner, drag it to the appropriate spot, and there you've got a joining point for your line. That's very useful in places like this where you've got lots and lots of little lines intersecting to delineate the various points or the topology. Let's see, the other things that I wanted to mention, of course, line join, for when you've put that vertex there and you want to join it with the end of another line or a point that you've put in place to define this break between the two separate parts in the assembly. And last, deform contour. Deform contour is incredibly handy when you can very easily spot a point here and a point here and join a line between them, and then using deform contour you can take your straight line and just drag it right out to whatever you need. And that's the basic tools, and I keep them parked over here in their own toolbar. Let me go ahead and show you where I'm at this point. I've used a few splines. I really limit splines to places where I know for sure they're not going to be broken, because when you draw a spline, and in order to break it, you basically have to explode it, and what you get is a million little line and arc segments, and you don't need that. Nobody needs that. That clutters up your drawing. Well, it doesn't clutter it up. It basically throws a very large load onto your computer in order to lug all those little parts. To the computer, this spline is not really much more complex than this little piece right here. But if you break it up into 1,000 of them, well, then it's 1,000 of these added to your drawing. So I'll limit that. I've got a spline here at the top of the hammer, one defining the back of the hammer, one defining the entire grip. I'll almost certainly make a spline to do the inside and outside of the trigger guards. Places like this compound curve on the charging lever is a good place for a spline. Also, this flat on the side of the barrel toward the rear, that will be defined with several splines actually, because I've got some compound curves that I need to define rails for an embossment there. Let's see. Alright, one of the things I wanted to talk about right off the bat is how what you're doing here differs from your normal CAD drawing. What you see right here is a bleeding mess. If this were CAD, I would deserve to get thrown out of the room for drawing that. It doesn't make sense. It's not something that you would do. However, it does make sense when you're just putting down geometry for an embossment. If I'm going to define a curve, and actually let me go ahead and, well, I don't have the setup properly for doing the embossment right now. If I were going to define this curve, which is essentially a spherical part that's been cut in half where the hammer comes into it, and it's got a scallop cut out of the side. First thing I've got to do is define this curve, and then I've got to emboss it. And in order to emboss it, I'm going to emboss down below where this side plate goes. I'm going to emboss right through this area where the part is cut away. Later on, I'll take this roughly triangular area. I'll have a separate embossment that will just mash it all down flat to the plane where my cursor is going here. This embossment will ride up over the part that goes down along this line. But for an embossment, it doesn't matter that I've got all this crazy drawing going on. If I tell it I want it to use for one rail this and this, that's all it sees. That's all it's going to look at. For the other rail, I want it to use this one. And now I can give it a curve and tell it I want it to sweep all the way around, pinning the curve to these two rails, and it'll do it. It ignores, it doesn't even see all this other stuff. So you run into situations like that where in drawing out the part, you have to think about, okay, what all parts do I have? Separate them out into embossments mentally. So I've got this one embossment that is actually going over and impinging on not one but two other embossments. Inside that, I'll have this second embossment that'll cut out the scallop, and I'll even have a third one to take this little groove, which is the guideway for the percussion gaps that fit down onto those nipples. Oh, and while I'm talking about this, one other thing. This is a photograph of a modern Italian replica of an 1860 Army revolver. It's really faithful except for one thing. See that screw right there? When I look at a photograph of an actual Colt 1860 Army revolver, which this is a pretty good photo, and I found this after I'd started the other one. There is no screw there. These pins are in the right place, but no screw. So I'm not going to have that as part of the embossment. I probably won't mention that again, but when you notice on toward the end that when I look at the image, that screw is missing, well, that's why. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and draw some more offline, because it'll bore you to tears if I'm just sitting there connecting lines and tweaking curves. And when I come to some interesting tasty bits, like when I start doing this compound curve especially, we'll come back in and do some more narration. Okay, at this point I've gotten most everything lined out. The major things I wanted to talk about are really the most complex part of the assembly, which is this barrel assembly here. First thing to note here, you'll see that I've got something odd going on there. This charging plunger, which is when you pull this handle down, by the way, just what this does is you've already poured black powder down into the cavities in the cylinder. Then you place a ball on top of the cylinder, and this lever, you undo it right there, pull the lever down this way, it pushes the charging plunger down, and it seats the ball into there. This is actually a muzzle loading black powder revolver. A lot of people don't even realize these existed. But before the advent of the Smith & Wesson, I believe, actually did the first 44 caliber cartridges, and then Colt followed on very shortly thereafter. Until then, if you wanted a lot of firepower, you carried more pistols. You didn't reload in combat because you would be dead. Anyway, this plunger, in order to do a quick and easy embossment, I went ahead and pushed it within the frame, the geometry that is, because I'm just going to do a regular emboss with a convex arc. It would look funky back here if I just tried to stop it there, so I pushed it within the frame. The other thing to note is on this barrel, we've got several features that we've got to emboss. We've got, of course, the round barrel. We've got the flat on the side here. We've got this concavity that runs fore and aft. And we've got a pretty inconvenient little cutout here. And all of that pretty well has to be modeled to make this look right. So first things first, got the barrel drawn out, and I threw a spline in here that doesn't really correspond with anything. What it's for is, as the round barrel comes back, I'm just going to swell it all out, kind of pear-shaped here, full round the whole way, and it will be basically bulbous in here. I'll take another embossment and push it down flat, and then there'll be a third embossment, which will be basically this part here merging just straight over into the larger barrel piece. That'll provide everything except the concavity. That'll be a 1, 2, 3, fourth emboss will be the concavity, and then because of the way that will have to work, there will be some oddness going on here. I'll have to have a fifth emboss to just stomp that all flat and make this look like there's it'll be an emboss, but it'll look like there's no emboss. So anyway, I've got the definition of the main barrel swell here. Next thing I got to look at is this flat. Now the flat, obviously the barrel rounds over at the top, so the flat really goes there forward, more or less gets undefined here, but then it swings in and it follows this down. So in order to put that in, I've got a nice vertex right there that I can hook that one to. I'll take a spline up to here, and it'll be close enough. There's lots of artistic license or just plain liberties taken with this. I very often say close is close enough. Really good case in point is I'm just going to make this a little billet stuck into the end of this lever instead of trying to model the little spring in there. It's not worth it. Not worth the time of the day. Okay, so up here I don't have anything to anchor it to, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use break divide that into two pieces, giving me a vertex I can play with. I'll use drag corner to drag the vertex up about there, and now I can go ahead and take a fitted spline, holding down the shift key and clicking on that line gives me a vertex I can anchor to, and I'll just start lining right out along this curve. I want to miss that securing pin because I will be embossing it. It gets a little undefined in this point. or this part, so I'm just going to curve up and right there. And the top part is a straight line, so I'll just use line join, shift and click, gives me a vertex, bring it out here and attach to that. So that defines the flat embossment. Now, and one thing I'm going to do while I'm at this is color code these, because I'm going to have a lot of lines in here, and it'll make it a lot easier if I can very quickly, just at a glance, see what's what. So these two, I'm going to select them, modify attributes, color, and we'll make them we'll say purple. Not a lot, but you can see it pretty easily. Alright, the next thing is to define this piece here. Alright, it's going to have to go beyond this line in order to join. So we'll say halfway up that line to there. So I do have to use break divide. Click OK, and that gives me a vertex to anchor to. And again, we'll just use a fitted spline, holding shift to get in vertex. And this can go way on in, it's not really an issue, so I'm just going to go straight across. Because it'll be color coded, I'm not even going to worry about crossing that pin. And when we get over here, holding down shift shows me the vertex at the end. I'll choose that as my anchor point. Click OK. That one I want to also give a color. So clicking on it, give modify attributes, color, we'll say that's green. I don't have to really make all of this green. That just lets me know, okay, what's that all about? I look at it and say, oh, okay, well that must be the top of this whole little part here. Lastly, I want to define two rails. The two rails are for the concavity here. And one of them could be this one, except that it goes too far and I don't want to break it, because as I mentioned earlier, breaking splines gives you lots and lots of little pieces. So I'm going to instead just draw another one almost on top of it, and I'll end it roughly there. And then I'll draw another one at the bottom. We'll go from that intersection and just stop it here. These don't actually have to, no, that would be better if it did join something, so I'll go ahead and break that and give myself a vertex. And that's in the right place. So, alright, so I'll go back to fitted spline. I'm going to start it in the same place. Something is wrong. Try that again. There. And basically following, oh, okay, I know what's happening. When you basically touch one spline with another as you're drawing it, it causes some funkiness, so I need to be a little bit better at avoiding that. So I'll start there. And just make sure I don't ever have my other spline highlighted as I come around. and that'll do. So okay, that's my top one. Now I want to throw the bottom one in. We'll go from that intersection and just follow this ridge. And there's the intersection that I put in place for it. So there. Click OK. Now I want to select both of those and give them a color so that I know that they're paired, and we'll pick orange. Alright, so now we're pretty well ready for this one. I've got my flat shown up here in purple. I know what that's going to be. The green is just the top part of this lower part of the barrel forging. That part, or that line, that spline there is the lower part of the barrel swell, and then I've got a rail here and a rail here. They're going to define the concavity that gets embossed in there. And I believe that is going to do it. I've got lots and lots of stuff drawn in. You'll see one or two changes. I think I had a fillet there that I took out. I've taken one liberty basically with the major structure of the gun. You can see that there's part of the frame actually projects a little bit and the cylinder fits over it, and there's a pawl and ratchet system inside there. I had shrunk that down to a smaller axle, basically kind of an extension of this piece back here. It's not quite centered, but it's close enough. The depressions here for the percussion nipples are close. They're not right on. I just kind of drew those in to make it look visually okay. But overall, that is what we're going to work with to get all our embossments. And we'll pick that up in the next video. Thanks for watching.